What's up, everybody? How are we doing? I'm not gonna front, I'm a little annoyed already, but... Damn it, not this map again. Ugh. I don't even know what this... Karachi. I swear to God, this is my least favorite map of all time. Like, I truly cannot stand this map anymore. But anyways, we're just gonna be grinding now. I got a few more tokens I need to get for this battle pass to finish it out. And then, depending on how much later, how long that takes me, I might jump into a little zombies. I'm not really gonna be online long today. It's kind of out of my normal schedule for a Monday. I had some stuff going on this week, so haven't really been in the gym. So I'm just gonna spend a little time online, grind out this a little bit, react to some videos while we're at it, and see what we come up with. So for any of my American viewers, we just got out of Thanksgiving. Camper. We just got out of Thanksgiving, so I saw these videos the other day, and I flagged them for myself to come back to. So I figured it would be pretty appropriate to get into Thanksgiving related topics. Now these couple videos I found are from our existing human Crowder. He is a human, so I can't really say friend or anything, like, but he's a being that exists, so there's that for him, I guess. And he's most known for the change my mind bits, where he'll like go set up a little table somewhere with like a sign that says something something change my mind. That's really how he got his start. But then he also then got picked up by Shapiro and their group to kind of like expand on that, you know, right-wing kind of ideology, essentially. But I thought this one was interesting because the title was Thanksgiving Isn't Racist. Change my mind. And for one, as an American, we've been taught our entire upbringing, for the most part, especially in the public school systems, that, you know, Thanksgiving is a time to be thankful because, you know, if it wasn't for the wonderful Native Americans sharing their crops and whatnot with us, with the settlers, they all would have perished because they didn't have enough supplies and whatnot. Now, if you ask me, that's already a half-truth. And it makes me think of a quote that I honestly can't even think of, like, the word for word right now. I could look it up, but I'm a little busy. But the loose saying of this quote was basically the writers of history are the victors, you know, like, we don't, the history books are only written by the peoples who win the war, you know what I mean? So of course we're not going to be privy to the truth. We're going to be privy to what they want us to know. And regardless of whatever truth they say it is, it's still it's kind of a subjective. Take a second. I'll Google this term real fast. I believe it's subjective because subjective is belonging thinking subject rather than the object of thought. Okay, subject. Yeah, so it's very subjective. Because, for instance, when it comes to Thanksgiving, there's the settlers' truth, there's the Native Americans' truth, and then there's the truth, right? Because they always say there's their truth, this person's truth, and then the fucking actual truth. So, with that being said, you know, the settlers got to kind of write the history books on how everything happened. It's well known that the settlers screwed over the Native Americans in countless ways. You know, trading them supplies with smallpox on blankets in order to slowly kill off them because they've never been introduced to such diseases. And it was just decimating the population. Meanwhile, these nice Native American folks are trying to, you know, be hospitable essentially to these settlers, helping them through the winter. But then the settlers turn around, screw them over, steal all their land, and then let's not even get started on the Trail of Tears. So when somebody says Thanksgiving isn't racist, to me that already sets off red flags, because it's like, how could you say that? How could you possibly think that it couldn't be? Just because, you know, your white Jesus told you that it's a time to be thankful, or that's what you were told in your history class, that doesn't necessarily always make it true, right? So I'm curious to see, we've got two clips directly from this same sit down, it looks like, where this first one, he labels educating Muslim college girl on non-racist history of Thanksgiving. So I'm definitely wanting to get into that one. And then we got another one here, mind changed, college girl finds out Thanksgiving isn't racist. So let's hear what nonsense this guy speaks.
You don't like Christmas, you don't like Ramadan, you don't like Easter, you don't like Thanksgiving. I believe that there are certain moments throughout American history, I like the 4th of July, Independence, that can be celebrated regardless of imperfections throughout history. And I think that's important to note. And I think that it's a good...
I hope, just off of this little snippet, I hope his argument isn't something like, well, it's a tradition, so it's something that should be celebrated because it's part of our American history, so it should be celebrated. It's a crock of shit, dude. Doesn't make it any better. Doesn't make it any less racist just because we've been doing it for so long and just because it's tradition. Some traditions can be racist.
Good thing to honor and show that there can be a moment in time of peace, because we had it for 50 years, regardless of the wars that happened before we came here.
Do centuries outweigh 50 years? Do you think Native Americans are thankful for being put on reservations, like centuries after Thanksgiving?
Being given reservations after they lost wars? Yeah.
Okay.
Notice how he says given reservations. See, and that's already, I feel like, gonna fucking get on my nerves, because he's saying it, they were given these reservations because after they lost these wars. So you're already coming into this with a settler's mentality, a victor's mentality of, well, we conquered them because we had stronger weapons, so it's not racist because, you know, we won the war and then tried to be peaceful after. Oh god.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. So
this should be interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure you know the topic of discussion today. I know that we're often taught, especially in schools, like Columbus Day, Thanksgiving, that it's a racist holiday. I don't agree. I think it's a wonderful holiday that should unify the nation. I think it has done me good, will do me good. I say God bless it. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And if you disagree, you're more than welcome to change my mind.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So
if you want to scooch in, you can't, so you don't have to lean, yeah.
So Thanksgiving is actually my favorite holiday as well.
Oh.
I think that where it gets controversial is the origin story that we're taught about it.
Sure.
That Native Americans and Pilgrims peacefully got together
Sure.
and shared a meal, and that's the story that kids are taught. That's kind of the narrative that we push, especially now that you're dressed as a pilgrim.
I appreciate that you recognize
Yeah, of
the
course.
garb. This wasn't all for naught.
But I saw a video that was made in 2015, and it's from cut.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a video that is a series of interviews that they interview Native Americans, and they ask them to describe Thanksgiving in one word, right?
Sure.
And these people say massacre, racist, false holiday,
Sure.
unpeaceful, these kinds of things. So I think if we're asking Native Americans how they feel about the holiday, and that's what they're saying, then shouldn't we listen to them?
Oh, sure, you can listen to them. It doesn't mean that that's what the holiday is.
Okay, so
So before we get to, why is it your favorite holiday?
So already right there, you could flip your argument and say, all right, so just because you think it's this peaceful thing and blah, 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 but is that really the history of it? Is that really what it's all about?
I really like
What
cooking.
is Thanksgiving?
Oh,
And that's what the holiday is about for me. It's about giving thanks to the people in my life. I just think that when people talk about how Thanksgiving
what are
is,
you most thankful for?
I guess being able to go home to my family and having that
good
meal.
one. Good.
Yeah, right. But I think that when people are talking about how Thanksgiving is controversial, that's what they're talking about. So how
Sure.
do you come back to that?
Well, it's incorrect.
It's incorrect. Okay.
Yeah, it's incorrect. So Thanksgiving is a celebration of in the 1620s when the Pilgrim settlers did have a meal of Thanksgiving with the I think it's pronounced Wampanoag. Is that, do you know? I want to
Yeah,
make sure I'm getting that right. Wampanoag. And they
Wampanoag.
did celebrate and then had 50 years of peace after that. Now, if we want to talk about the fact that there have been some acts of barbarism committed.
Some acts.
Yeah, of course, committed against Native Americans, and of course, committed against Native Americans from Native Americans themselves, obviously. Yeah, that happened, obviously, throughout the historical timeline, but that didn't happen at Thanksgiving. And it's interesting because, do you know when Thanksgiving was recognized officially as a federal holiday? So this is why I actually think it's the least racist holiday out there, because it's proactively a holiday designed to symbolize unity. It was Abraham Lincoln who wanted to, after the Civil War, after some, do you mind if I pause real quick? Because I don't have that kind of pole. I assume there's a hunchback up there who has an Antifa face mask. So after the Emancipation Proclamation, actually very soon after, Abraham Lincoln thought it would be a good idea to have a national holiday that symbolized unity for all Americans at this point, black Americans, white Americans, and so they did look back to that 1921 original Thanksgiving that symbolized the old world converging with the new world in 50 years of peace.
Okay.
So in looking to create a unifying holiday across all racial divides, he looked to a moment in early American history, before we were officially a country, where that happened as well. So that's why we celebrate Thanksgiving.
But even if something proactively promotes unity, if there are people who don't feel that way,
Sure.
then those people were marginalized and affected by the acts of barbarism that you said happened.
But not by Thanksgiving. Did it happen throughout history? Sure. But not by Thanksgiving.
But if Thanksgiving is about a moment of unity between Pilgrims and Native Americans,
Yeah.
but the rest of the time that those two peoples interacted was filled with violence and inequality,
Yeah.
then why is it just that day?
Well, a couple of things. First off, it wasn't the rest of the time.
It was most of the time.
No.
Millions of Native American people died because of colonial people coming over.
Yeah, well,
That's a
it's
fact.
estimated actually about 50% of Native Americans.
That's
probably were wiped out.
half the people. That's
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Do you know how many of the settlers were wiped out?
They came here. They
30%. So, in other words, it's not a genocide, as
It is a genocide.
Well, it's actually not a genocide by definition. I mean, I don't
They
know.
brought the
Bro, how are you going to use those numbers? You just said it yourself. The settlers only lost 30% after they came across the Atlantic Ocean, fighting gangrene and all these other diseases along the way. but they also then wiped out 50% of the Native American population. That's not peaceful.
Disease.
Well, hold on a second, guys. Let's just keep the conversations between two folks. They did bring disease. Yeah, they did bring disease with them, and it did wipe out quite a few Native Americans. That was actually before the Thanksgiving. You know, that's where they came back to an abandoned village. I'm sure you're aware of that because they were wiped out by diseases that largely they hadn't encountered because they hadn't domesticated most animals yet. You know, they hadn't domesticated horses. They had no contact with horses. They were technologically very regressive. They didn't use the wheel. So what happened was there was a moment of peace there for 50 years. We had a very long portion of history that was very peaceful with Native Americans. There were multiple alliances between new settlers and Native Americans because Native Americans were warring with each other. And we do choose, though, as a holiday to celebrate this moment of unity. We choose to celebrate a positive moment. I mean, you can look at Veterans Day or Memorial Day. Well, there are horrible actions
Yeah, I
that
feel
were
the
committed.
same way about those holidays as
Oh, you
well.
do?
I do.
Same thing with 4th of July?
Yes.
Same thing with Christmas?
Yeah.
Ramadan?
I'm Muslim, yep.
Okay, because obviously slavery is still practiced across the Islamic world. So you believe that,
Okay.
no, is it not?
I mean, it's practiced across the entire world.
Not in the United States.
Not just the
Well, not in
Islamic
the United
world.
States,
Well, the
'cause you're talking
world
about
isn't the United States versus the Islamic world, is it? It's the world, the Islamic world, all different kinds of parts.
Well, in comparison to, example, the settlers in modern America. The point is, but we're not celebrating that with Ramadan, are we? We're not celebrating the Spanish Inquisition when we celebrate Christmas, right? Christians committed some horrible actions. We're not celebrating war with Native Americans when we celebrate Thanksgiving. We're celebrating a moment of peace and unity because it shows that it can be done.
I think what people want is an acknowledgement that these things happen,
I've already done that.
right?
Yeah.
Which an acknowledgement of
How
these
did you already
racist
do
things
that?
that did happen, and implying that maybe the narrative that we push isn't true, and that acknowledging that there was a disagreement and violence between these people.
Sure.
I think people just want that acknowledgement, and by flat out saying Thanksgiving is not racist, I think a better way to
It's
say,
not.
I think you could say these things did happen, and this is what it's based on, and Thanksgiving has evolved into become
I think
something
that-
else. But that doesn't mean I'm going to erase the opinions of Native Americans who suffered.
Well, who erased opinions of Native Americans who suffer? That's not what I'm doing.
By saying Thanksgiving
Yes, you
isn't
are.
inherently racist, you are erasing that.
So in other words, unless I say that Thanksgiving is inherently racist, I am erasing the opinion of all Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, not all, but those who feel that Thanksgiving is racist.
Well, just because
And they were the
feel that, I'm
but
not
they were the
erasing.
marginalized group, you know, and we're pushing this
Wh-
narrative that they were happy to have.
At Thanksgiving they were. And for 50 years they were.
Okay,
So isn't that a good thing?
I've heard that dinner didn't happen.
So they were happy for 50 years. What happened to the other centuries there, bud? There's like a couple more 100 years in between there that we're losing count of. So what exactly are you getting at, Crowder?
What did happen?
Okay.
Not only, and I've also heard this, you know, people try to go to the Winthrop Diaries later, and I believe it was in the 1630s, where they had Thanksgivings during times of war against the Pequots. But that wasn't all the same thing. They were thankful for during battle that they had fewer casualties. And so I think that's probably what you're conflating. They teach that often in school. I know it's kind of interesting that you say we don't teach any of this. When I went to college, when I went to high school, I was only taught about colonialism and how awful the settlers were. I was never taught, for example, of all the warring between the tribes, of the cannibalism, of the scalping that they were doing. I was taught that they were peaceful people, and these settlers came in.
That's a false statement right there, because no one has ever talked about how peaceful they were and blah, blah, blah. They might have talked about how peaceful they were towards the settlers, but it's always been talked about how there was various tribes throughout the Americas who all had different conflicting views, no different from any other, you know, nation states that have ongoing wars amongst their people because of differing views, differing ideologies. So that alone is, in my, like, that can't be true. I don't know what freaking books this dude was looking at, but if I at a public school have been hearing about it since like 3rd grade, the differences between the different tribes and the wars going on amongst them, and then you're gonna now say that you've never been taught that until you got to college? I think fake news there, bud. Now, maybe you also heard a lot more about the settlers and how bad they were in those schools because, you know, like they like to blame wokeisms in the school, you know, brainwashing our kids, so maybe they told you that the settlers were bad. But they were bad. You know, they weren't nice people to the Native Americans. And if racist isn't the word, it's still not pleasant. Y'all still didn't do a good thing. But this is what I was kind of trying to speak on in the beginning of, like, history's written by the victors. So the people who lose, their story gets, you know, lost in the shuffle. It gets pushed to the back, pushed to an appendix page at the back of the textbook versus a whole chapter like everything else. So, come on, Crowder.
And stole their land, when the reality was they were warring, they were barbaric. We had many years of peace. We came in, we purchased land, we traded, we had a healthy trading relationship for a while. And
they were barbaric? They lived here. This was their land.
By whose standards?
You could argue that the colonialists were barbarians for coming in and taking their land.
I certainly would say the colonialists were barbaric compared to us today. And I would certainly say that Native Americans were barbaric in their practices compared to the colonialists.
Well, just because you don't agree and understand with something doesn't make it barbaric.
Well, I just mean, you know, the fact that they didn't have plumbing or use the wheel.
They didn't have plumbing?
They didn't have plumbing. The Romans
that
did.
doesn't make them inferior to other people.
No, it just means it's barbaric.
Okay.
Wow.
And when I'm talking about barbaric, I'm talking about less evolved technically and societally.
Okay, so a definition rather than the connotation.
Yes, definition rather than the connotation.
So you seem to be someone who ignores connotations.
No, I don't.
Because Thanksgiving has a negative connotation in some people's eyes, but you're ignoring that connotation.
So does Christmas.
Yeah, so does Christmas. And you don't talk about that either?
I do talk about Christmas. I love Christmas. I think it's wonderful and should be celebrated. I know that you've made it clear that you disagree. You don't like Christmas. You don't like Ramadan. You don't like Easter.
Christmas is just a commercial holiday to get people to spend money. It doesn't even talk about Jesus anymore. Nobody even freaking goes to church for the Christmas mass anymore. And it could be argued that that probably wasn't even his birthday.
You don't like Thanksgiving. I believe that there are certain moments throughout American history, I like the 4th of July, independence, that can be celebrated regardless of imperfections throughout history. And I think that's important to note. And I think that it's a good thing to honor and show that there can be a moment in time of peace. Because we had it for 50 years, regardless of the wars that happened before we came here.
Do centuries outweigh 50 years? Do you think Native Americans are thankful for being put on reservations, like centuries after
Do you mean
Thanksgiving?
being given reservations after they lost wars? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me ask you this.
Given land after they lost wars, why did they have to go through the wars in the first place, sir? Technically, it wasn't your land, so you guys came and fought and took it away from people.
Let me ask you this. So you don't like any of the holidays, okay? And you say that I'm completely ignoring someone's opinion if I don't agree with them.
No, that's not what I said. I said that you're ignoring the opinion of marginalized people who the holiday affects, who the glorification of the holiday negatively affects because it erases what they say happened to them. And they were here first, so they should have a say in what
Fuck this map.
the narrative's about.
Yeah, no one's saying they can't have a say. I don't believe it's a racist holiday.
But
That's
by
not
erasing someone's
ignoring the
experience,
marginalization.
erasing someone's experience is a form of racism. Erasing someone's experience and reframing it in.
But I didn't erase anybody's experience.
But by saying it isn't racist, you are
essentially.
erasing someone's experience.
No.
Yes, you are. Inherently.
Incorrect.
Why?
That's not the definition of racism.
What's the definition of racism?
Definition of racism is believing that somebody is inferior solely based on their race.
That's prejudice. Racism is institutionalized discrimination. Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
Well, I'm not an institution, so right now we're going with the individualized definition of
And
racism.
you're ignoring the.
All right, institutionalized definition of racism. Because notice how on that, it also had a nice little 1 next to it that normally implies there's other meanings behind it. So let's just go ahead and look at it. Oxford Learner's Dictionaries, racism, noun. The unfair treatment of people who belong to a different race, violent behavior towards them, a victim of racism, outbreaks of racism, da 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 da. 2. The belief that there are different races of people with different characteristics and abilities, and that some races are better than others, a general belief about a whole group of people based only on their race. And those are the 2 definitions given. So, the unfair treatment of people who belong to a different race, that in itself could kind of be what she's arguing towards, because you're unfairly treating them by completely ignoring their input on what this history is. So, I mean, I can understand why she would argue that it's racist, because once again, you're kind of unfair treating this Native American group because, you know, they're conflicting with what you have to say. I can kind of maybe see the gap, but
and you just accuse me individually of being racist.
You are.
So let me ask you this. Maybe we can find some common ground here, because you said you love Thanksgiving, but you don't like the holidays. What should we do then? Right? Contact is made between 2 civilizations, for example. This happens, right? One has rifles and one has wheels and horses, and they engage in peace. And then there are land disputes when land was purchased. So let's just get rid of what we have right now. What would you do? You would have no Thanksgiving? What would we do? What should the United States be? I'm genuinely curious.
I think just an acknowledgement, like everyone should acknowledge what happened.
Yes, I believe everyone does.
I don't think so.
I have.
have you?
Okay.
So is it okay to acknowledge that there were acts of horrible evil and violence across all sides and still celebrate Thanksgiving for what it is? Is that okay?
That's a good question. I haven't thought that far.
Do you think that it is better to celebrate Thanksgiving and recognize a moment of unity and encourage it, both with the early settlers, the early pilgrims and the Native Americans, as well as after the Civil War? Do you think it's more productive to have a day to celebrate that and encourage that kind of unity and bridging that cultural divide, or do you think it's less productive?
I think it's performative. So if something
like virtue signaling?
Yeah. So
Okay.
if something's performative, then does it really do the good that you're describing?
What good am I describing?
The unity that you're describing. Like, if
I
something is
sort-
performative, then is that unity really there, or is it a performative unity which doesn't actually?
Well, I think, you just talked about Thanksgiving cooking and spending time with family. That's unity right there, right? That's prioritizing giving thanks. I think that Thanksgiving, honestly, is the least exclusive holiday. Christianity, Christianity would exclude people of
Why?
other
'Cause
religions.
it's secular?
Ramadan would exclude people of other religions. You can take your pick from any of the religious holidays. Thanksgiving is be thankful for what it is that you do have, whether you're a Christian, whether you're
Well, are
Buddhist,
you and
whether
your
you're Muslim.
family going to talk about?
Okay, and that is the evolution of Thanksgiving. That's what we've evolved it to mean. Bro, that shit drives me insane. Just because you got EOD, I can't kill you with a grenade launcher? Like, are you fucking kidding? You're just immune to explosion damage because you've got this the frickin' EOD vest or whatever it is. That makes no fucking sense, bro. But anyways, she's if you ask me, they're both in a way right. I guess you could say. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say Crowder is right totally, but I can understand his point, I guess. But at the same time, the reason why I say they would both be right in this circumstance, in my opinion, is because she's simply saying we should acknowledge the truth of what that holiday is about. We should acknowledge that the Native American people were here first and what they did for us in those times during the settlers' times to allow them to exist. But we should also be acknowledging how fucked up they got treated afterwards. How their land was stolen from them. Point blank. I don't care what you say, like it was stolen. If these people were barbaric, you know, it doesn't make it okay for you to rule over them just because you view them as barbaric. So it's kind of like an acknowledgement of their history that should be taught and spoken about. And I think that's what this young woman is trying to, you know, get at with her points, is that we ignore all of those people, we ignore everything those people have been through, and we don't acknowledge how fucked up we are. What in the actual hell? Bro, I swear to God, this grenade launcher is broken, dude. Dud. Didn't even blow up. Like, what the hell is that? That's so annoying.
Switching mags.
So this RGL is just dookie.
Hostile cruise missile incoming.
Of course, it's coming for me. No.
Not one. Changing mags.
So yes, Thanksgiving can be a time to be thankful for what you do have and blah blah blah.
Switching mags.
And that's the nice little, like, that's no different from people saying, well, Christmas is a great holiday. It's about family. It's about bringing people together. It's about celebrating. That's what you can tell yourself it's about, but then that's not what the greater group of people are doing. That's not what the greater society as a whole is acknowledging. We're just looking at it as a nice day to get off of work so we can all spend time with family and eat. And then realistically, once Thanksgiving is probably like the least respected holiday, because once October comes around, Halloween decorations come out. Once Halloween's over, it's Christmas. Like, Thanksgiving gets brushed over. Like, it's damn near like a second thought now, because it's just a placeholder to get you through till Christmas, where you get to buy shit and you get gifts. And that's really all, like, people really look at it as. Oh, it's just that fucking time of year where I gotta go eat dinner with my family. Nobody sits down and talks about what they're thankful for, really. You know, unless, you know, they're grown up in that thought process to kind of acknowledge those things. So it's kind of unfair to him to kind of like say it's not racist, it's because of this. That's your subjective belief behind it. That's not totally talking about American society as a whole. Because if we really look at it as a whole, it just gets boiled down to dinner with the family, so we can start talking about what we want for Christmas.
About what happened to the Native Americans?
And we don't
we've
talk
talked about it all throughout my life, and I learned about it
Are
in
you
school.
going to talk about? Are you going?
He learned about it all throughout his life, and we talk about it at school. But like, when Christmas comes around, we have the Christmas Story movie that plays on repeat. Then we have like the Jesus movies that play throughout the day because it's supposed to be his day. Why don't we have some kind of documentaries that get played on TV every Thanksgiving instead of a fucking parade? Instead of everybody wanting to watch the Macy Day Parade. Who cares about a bunch of balloons floating down the goddamn street? really, who cares? Let's be educational. Let's talk about it. Let's acknowledge it. Instead of 2 hours of watching the Macy's bullshit, let's spend 2 hours watching the history of Thanksgiving. I mean, it's not a unfair ask.
You're gonna acknowledge it at the dinner table?
I don't know. Do I have to?
You should,
Okay.
right?
You should.
Why not?
I didn't say I wouldn't.
You should.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me what I should and should not do in my
welcome.
personal time.
You're welcome.
And you wouldn't think that that is that at all in any way is overstepping bounds or being pushy.
No,
Okay.
I don't.
All right. Well, maybe you should discuss with your family the history that you learned that wasn't accurate that you brought here to the table, and maybe you can all get an accurate account of what happened historically, and maybe discuss as well the acts of barbarism that still go on since you're Muslim across the Islamic world. Do you do that at Ramadan?
Yeah, I do actually.
You do.
I do.
So what do you discuss at Ramadan?
I discuss
Indentured
how
servitude.
I like to discuss how I think that Islam itself isn't, in certain Middle Eastern countries, how it's unequal for women.
Sure.
And as a woman, and as a Muslim woman who was raised Muslim, I believe that that's unequal, and I will acknowledge that. I like to acknowledge how Saudi Arabia, for example, is guilty of hypocrisy. You know, the royal family has so much money.
I notice you're talking a lot lower right now.
Yeah, I am.
Is it because you're concerned about criticizing Islam?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe
Huh.
that's just ingrained in me.
What? That's peculiar.
Yeah.
Point blank
It is.
shooting this dude with a
Nice
rocket
talking to you.
launcher,
Well, I
and he
appreciate
does
it, and I
it
appreciate
blow
your,
up.
your intellectual honesty there, and that you have those discussions. I don't.
makes
By the way, I
no
don't think you need to do that
sense.
at Ramadan. I think that enjoying Ramadan for the holiday that it is and celebrating it with your family is a wonderful thing, regardless of. Listen, Muslims are imperfect. Christians are imperfect. Native Americans are certainly imperfect. If you go back to old colonial England, and the Church of England are certainly imperfect. But the Irish are certainly imperfect. But it's not my business to
I
tell them
think-
what they need to discuss on
I
St.
think
Patrick's Day.
just when I saw that video and when I've talked to Native American people and just heard about what happened, I just have empathy for what they say,
Sure.
and it just makes it difficult to not speak up for them.
I have empathy. Here's the thing. I hope
know
you
what I
understand.
mean? Like, it's
I have
hard for
empathy
me.
as well, but you can also have empathy and understand that what people are saying is inaccurate. For example, I have a relative who's bipolar. Okay, I'm not saying Native Americans are bipolar. This is an example. I hope you understand this, right? I have a relative who's bipolar, and he will describe situations or scenarios that are not real.
And you have empathy for them.
And I have empathy for him, but it's not necessarily accurate. And so I love him, and I care about him, and I let him know that I love him and I care about him, but I don't engage on the plane, on the wavelength that what you're saying is accurate.
I don't
and
think
I can
you
have
can
empathy.
compare severe mental illness to the way people feel about
We're not supposed to use the term
historical
mental illness
injustice.
anymore.
Yes, you are.
Depending on what it is, depending on how it's defined by the DSM-5.
I'm mentally ill, and I use that term.
I'm definitely mentally ill. But again, I was saying I'm not comparing bipolar to Native American. I was saying that one can have empathy without necessarily agreeing with the premise as far as its accuracy. So I can have empathy for Native Americans saying, hey, Thanksgiving to me represents all of these wars that occurred and these battles and genocide, and I can say, hey, I understand how you feel, but that's not what Thanksgiving is celebrating. And I can say, I understand how you feel, but there also wasn't mass genocide committed if you actually look at it
There was
statistically.
mass genocide committed.
By definition, it wasn't genocide. There were wars, and one side won. One-sided war, mind you. But there was by that definition, there was genocide with the Mohawks and the Mohicans, the Algonquins and the Iroquois. I mean, they would cannibalize people in front of their family.
Fuck.
Right? If one of them had advanced technology, in other words, one of them were as advanced as the early settlers, this would all be Mohawk country.
Yeah, that's true.
It wasn't a peaceful culture. Everyone, right? This is human nature. And I think that taking a holiday and removing the grace from it, removing the beauty of this holiday, which is meant to symbolize unity and giving thanks, to simply re-inject what is human nature, acts of evil that occurred not during this holiday, but somewhere in a timeline, I don't think helps promote healing. I think if anything, it's divisive.
So we can agree that do we agree that the idea of Thanksgiving in your head has shifted into something else? Not a celebration or not an erasure of racism, but a celebration of unity.
Yes,
Is that what you think?
Thanksgiving is a celebration
Of unity?
and it always has been.
But why
It's a
can't
celebration
it
of
be,
giving
why
thanks.
can't it be a celebration of unity and like an acknowledgement of the erasure?
You can do that.
Yeah, that's
You
what
can do
I'm
that.
arguing.
Yeah. I just think that if people are going to do that, it also needs to be accurate. So if people are going to teach, for example, and I think we would both agree, right, on college campus, you guys are certainly not taught that, oh, the settlers were great and it was peaceful. That's certainly not what's being taught on campus.
I have to go to class.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. What was your
Seems
name
like
again?
Safa. Seems like no one can change your mind. So
I appreciate it, Safa. Well, I thought that was a good conversation, no?
Watch Slider with Crowder live Monday through Thursday.
It was a
10
decent
a.m.
conversation, but I'm not really seeing Crowder's point to say it's not racist. Like, he's just simply saying, well, I don't see why we need to acknowledge this because it's a time of acknowledging what we're thankful for. Okay, so if you can acknowledge what you're thankful for, why can't you acknowledge the history that these people
Killed.
lived and what they're suffering from? You know, it could be an acknowledgement of both. Like, yeah, I'm thankful for this land. I'm thankful for all the Native American people whose lives were lost because of these settlers taking it from them. You know, it could be both. I think there could be a middle ground there. Why do we have to celebrate it and push this narrative if we don't even know if it's the truth or not? That's just what they tell us. No different.
I do
Okay,
believe
so you
in
don't.
like
No different from the way they say, like, oh well, you know, if they tell us that they identify as this, why do I have to believe that? Why do I have to acknowledge that? Well, why the fuck do I have to buy a turkey? Why the fuck do I have to spend
Shoot me again.
this time saying I'm thankful for this?
Grenade. Shit.
You know, in a way, they're both right,
Switching mags.
and they're both wrong.
Reparations, actually.
Oh, okay, so who do we give it back to? The Mohicans or the Mohawks? Because they were slaughtering each other.
I believe that
the
there should
Algonquins or the
be.
Iroquois?
But this gets very technical.
Well, no,
though.
but my point is, there are
And-
no national days of mourning where the Mohawks and the Mohicans are recognizing the mass atrocities that they committed, scalping. We learned from them. You're not seeing that from the Mayans. This is why this land was conquered, and it wasn't mass genocide, by the way. It was 50% of the natives were wiped out. The estimates are about 30% of settlers. So that's not really a mass genocide. How many Gestapo were taken out by Jews at Auschwitz? 0. That's what genocide looks like, right?
Okay.
This was a war with one side that had horses. I'm sure you know they hadn't domesticated horses.
So just because 30% of the people of the settlers were killed in the process, it's not genocide? That's your argument? It is genocide because you're trying to take out these Native American people by the mass. You're trying to take them out of their land in mass. You're trying to tell them that they have to go to this this land we give them. Bro, like, that's genocide. 50% of the people were wiped out just in this conflict alone that we're referencing, not to mention the Trail of Tears and all the other things that were going on. He keeps using this argument that, well, they were fighting amongst themselves already.
Switching mags.
Does that make it any better for us to then come in and say, all right, we're gonna fight you and take over just because we have superior firepower now? It sounds like y'all are just mad because they were able to take out the 30%. Even though with their barbaric tools and weapons. But all that, like, so with that being said, like, if there was only 10% of settlers who were killed in this, would that be genocide? Or does it have to be 0%? If 0 settlers were killed, then it would be genocide to you? It's a little bit more than just the lives that were lost on either side. So he wants to use definitions. Let's use definitions. Genocide.
Mission time is half over. Maintain the lead. Hardpoint compromised. Secure the area.
The murder of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group.
Inside the perimeter.
That is what was done to the Native American people because we were trying to wipe them out to take over their land. by definition, Mr. Crowder.
No, I had not.
They didn't even use a wheel.
Yes.
So this was a very regressive society who lived here, by the way, for thousands of years. We would both agree that. Thousands of years. Let's go 1621.
Okay.
200 years we end slavery. It was a day in 1621 where
They were here for thousands of years, but just because we came across with our little boats, we gotta tell them to hand it over, or we wipe you out. Or you could just go to this little piece of area that we're gonna let you live in, and we'll leave you alone one day. Like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? It is genocide. It might not be racist. I'll give you that. It might not be racist, but it's fucking genocide, dude, no matter how you cut it.
they feasted with them. So it's a specific time that's recognized as a holiday for Thanksgiving because it was precisely about the old world and new world, bridging that divide and breaking bread together. And that was also symbolic of what happened after the Emancipation Proclamation. The country was at war. That's why it's designed to be as inclusive as possible. Any religion, race, gender, the whole point is Thanksgiving is to give thanks for what it is that you do have.
And if it's about this bridging of the gap because of the Emancipation Proclamation, that still further separates it from the actual Native Americans and that narrative that they push of what Thanksgiving's about, with the Pilgrims and the Native Americans sharing this meal, blah, 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 blah. Then you try to bring it back after we've freed slaves and after we've ended slavery and kind of changed that perspective. So now we could be thankful. Now we can be unified. No, dude, you're picking and choosing your battles here. Or you're picking and choosing how you want to look at it, and I don't like that.
And it's important to remember too that there were 50 years of peace after that.
Yes.
1621. So for a very long time. So what I am saying is that Thanksgiving, a lot of people say, well, it depends on what you think Thanksgiving. No, it doesn't depend. There's historical documentation. This is why we celebrate Thanksgiving.
Sure.
It was this feast, 50 years of peace afterward. That's a wonderful thing. It's not racist at all. Now, if people then want to talk about, and you went through a whole list, I mean, you went all the way down to Texas Rangers.
Yeah.
At first I thought you were saying Walker, Texas Rangers. Like Chuck Norris has nothing to do with the early Pilgrims, but you were going all the way through that. And this is what I see a lot of people doing. You did it to a more extreme example, you know, going down to the Alamo. But people say, well, because afterward there were abhorrent acts committed, therefore that taints Thanksgiving. And what I am saying is, no, Thanksgiving is not exclusive in any way. It's actually designed to be inclusive it's inclusive by design, and that sets a precedent which you would have to apply to every single holiday. From Christmas to Passover to Ramadan, any holiday, because you could say, well, after Christmas, they crucified Jesus, or there's the Spanish Inquisition. You could go through the atrocities that obviously, you know, Jews are not blameless.
But it's not the same, because in the previous video, you were just talking about how all of those other holidays are religious based. Thanksgiving is the one holiday that is not religious based, so it's more inclusive. So then how are you going to then compare it to these other religious holidays? You can't do that. Compare it to something like Veterans Day. And on Veterans Day, we don't sit there and talk about how thankful we are for these veterans. Most people just think, okay, I'm gonna wave my little flag. Thank you, USMC. Thank you, military. And that's it. We don't acknowledge the people who were freaking, like, all of the lives that were lost, not just the American ones in those wars. There's
either, and of course they've been the victims. This happens throughout society where people are sometimes they're the nail, sometimes they're the hammer. For some reason though, there is a disproportionate focus on kind of what you brought up, white European settlers who came here as though they are singularly unique or responsible for these acts of evil, and it comes up around the time of Thanksgiving, and I don't think it could be less appropriate or less productive. I think it's divisive, and I think it actually fractures us as opposed to taking part in a celebration that should encourage unity.
So the only thing that, and I see, I mean, obviously I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
but these the 50 years of peace and unity that you spoke of.
Yes.
And then you also spoke about the Emancipation Proclamation and how that was getting rid of slavery.
Right.
However, just because it got rid of slavery didn't mean that African Americans in this country were, they still went through so much.
I'm not saying at all that anyone is blameless.
But it's the idea that you're saying that
No. The only reason I want to be clear, the only reason I
Yeah.
brought that up is because that's when it was federally recognized as a holiday.
Well, yes. So, but what I'm
So-
trying to say is that Thanksgiving, I guess, in your kind of sense.
I want to be very clear. Do we both agree that that is why we celebrate Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
It's not just general pilgrims and Aboriginals or Indigenous. It's not
Yes,
general. Like,
it's
there's a very
supposed-
specific reason why we picked that day.
Yes.
And it's 1621, and then it goes to 1863 with Abraham Lincoln declaring it an official holiday.
Yes.
So it's just because a lot of people think there's wiggle room, there's no wiggle room as to why we celebrate Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to say we shouldn't celebrate it because of, and go down the list of grievances afterward, you can do that, and I'm more than willing to talk with you about that, but I don't think that that's fair to tar and feather a celebration because we choose what we celebrate.
Well, I don't think that we shouldn't celebrate Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And that's and like I was saying before, it's because I think there's so many things that we have to be thankful for. But I think that there's a separation now
Sure.
between the original reason for celebrating it and why we celebrate it now. More people, I think, when you think of celebrating Thanksgiving now, is more like, oh, I'm thankful for my mom, I'm thankful for my dad, I'm thankful
Like
that
an episode of Family Matters.
Exactly. And so
damn it.
or Full House or something like that.
Yes, and that's why I'm having this conversation, because I'm amazed at how many students here have no idea the actual history of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I think it is important for them to know, because I also think it's, if they understand, it's far harder to lead them astray with lies of mass genocide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mass genocide is
But
a complete topic that
Or
would
the
take forever.
the singularly unique evils of colonialism. We can go on down that trail afterward.
Well,
but
I mean,
let's
obvious-
start with Thanksgiving. Because
I was
I know
gonna
I
say-
did it. You're very talkative, and I can be that way too. Let's start with Thanksgiving. It seems like we agree on that. Thanksgiving is a good thing.
Well, I think that there are still two different topics that I
Okay.
think it's okay to go and say I'm thankful for this, but I think that we still have to recognize what this country has been built on and the backs of who this has been built on, and the actual entire history, rather than just thinking about this one day that kind of.
But my point is, this is one day. We celebrate that one day. You can go into any history classroom right now. We just had several students. I would think that you'd probably admit this. Almost always taught. Every student I've asked so far said, I've been taught basically about the genocide and the evils of the settlers. None of them were aware of the evil and barbarism that the natives committed against each other.
Well, I have been taught about that actually.
In school?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I have been taught about that.
But that's also, it's an intellectual fallacy to say, though, well, because this happened afterwards and applied to Thanksgiving. So I want to make sure that we both agree, Thanksgiving, great day to celebrate, good. And then separate from that, we can get into what you disagree with on the founding of the country, but that doesn't apply to the celebration of Thanksgiving.
But would you not say that if we're thinking about the foundations of this country and then thinking about, I feel like you're trying to separate the 2 days, but
Yes.
this day and the actual foundation of the country, and they shouldn't be separated because we have to think about the fact that there was a time before Thanksgiving when, when we first of all, when we started, yes, we were I'm not a direct associate with the Pilgrims, so I can't say we necessarily, but
Have you done a 23andMe?
yes, I have actually.
No pilgrim in your background?
Not that I'm
don't see
aware
this little
of.
hat
A lot
icon?
of
Okay.
Polish Jew, so
Really?
yes, and also French.
Good for you.
French colonial.
There aren't many left, obviously, Polish Jews. It was,
Yes, it was an unfortunate time for us
know.
during that time.
Terrible.
But I would definitely think that, and this is just my opinion, obviously, because we're just swapping opinions.
Sure.
But I think that there has to be an association between the two, just because if you don't think about everything that has happened in the past, why can't I be thankful that we're no longer committing these?
Okay. So let me ask you, you're Jewish,
I am Jewish.
right?
Yes.
So do you celebrate Passover?
Yes.
Okay. How do you celebrate Passover?
It's not necessarily. See, the thing is with Jewish holidays, a lot of them are not necessarily celebrations; they're reminders of the past.
Okay, sure.
And so I think that Thanksgiving, in some ways, should be like that.
Passover would remind you of what in the past?
I think that all the atrocities that Jews have gone through in the past. I mean, every especially like Yom Kippur is one where we think about how we didn't have food, we didn't have time to get out of Egypt.
Let me ask you this, and lest I do not want to sound like an anti-Semite, but I think we'll agree here. none of us would say that historically Jews are blameless in certain conflicts, right?
Well, I mean, I that I can't get into. I would have to
think we
say
should-
just I'm not educated enough.
At your holidays, do you also have a day of mourning over the atrocities that Jews have committed?
I personally no, but I also
Okay.
don't think that.
So, so now it's kind of like a victim blaming thing. So it's like, okay, you guys celebrate Passover, but do you guys celebrate the bad things you've done? So then why should we have to celebrate the bad things that the settlers have done? I don't think we should have to do that because no one else does. But like she just said, these Jewish holidays are more for the Jewish people to acknowledge the things and atrocities that happen to the Jewish people. Passover is one of the biggest ones, you know, regarding to how they were mistreated in the Egyptian world and how Moses freed them and blah, blah, blah. Right? They didn't have any oil, so for 8 days they, you know, were praying to God, and this oil then lasted them for 8 days. Oh no, I'm thinking of Hanukkah. I'm sorry. Passover, I think, was wasn't that related to the plagues, I thought. Festival holiday celebrated in March, April. Yeah, the escape of Israelites from Egypt. So I was right. But that's the acknowledgement of them getting free from the tyrannical rule of Egypt and the atrocities that were put upon them. And we acknowledge that all the time. Shit. Damn near the entire Bible is talking about the atrocities of the Jews and the atrocities put forth towards Jesus. That was... Is that not Easter? We're celebrating his resurrection from the death? Which is what Good Friday was, I'm pretty sure. Good Friday or Ash Wednesday, one of those two.
Friendly UAV online.
Ash Wednesday is a holy day of prayer, fasting, restoration.
Reloading.
Shows you it's the first day of Lent, on a special day of reflection, Catholics wear a mark on the cross and ash on their foreheads. Ashes symbolize mortality. I guess we shall return, but you might be wondering where the ashes from. I don't care about where the ashes come from. I want to know what is. That's pretty good. But although Ash Wednesday is enriched with Christian symbolism, we don't actually find an instance of this particular holiday in the Bible. Didn't have a biblical origin, but owing to the Council of Nicaea implementing a 40-day fasting period prior to Easter. What is the meaning of Good Friday? Is the day in which Christian and Catholic churches commemorate the crucifixion and death of Christ. So, I mean, in a sense, isn't that a negative thing?
I'm not educated enough.
At your holidays, do you also have a day of mourning over the atrocities that Jews have committed?
We have a day of mourning of the atrocities of what the Romans did to the Christians and Jews.
I personally no, but I also don't think that I'm educated enough on those topics in order to have like an actual conversation about that. Just,
Sure, but my point is, it's applying the same standard right to Jewish holidays.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, I support Israel's right to exist. I certainly support them in the face of Hamas, and you look at Hezbollah, and you look at the Six-Day War. I'm far more conservative. That's why people think I'm Jewish and call me I'm working for Jewish shills. But I certainly wouldn't say that any group of people are blameless. But the point is, you're saying we need to celebrate this American holiday and recognize the fatal flaws in the United States. It doesn't sound to me like you're applying that same standard to Jewish holidays.
Well, I think that that's definitely something that is flawed, and I also don't know. I wouldn't say I know enough about how to change the Jewish system. I would, if I could, I would definitely try and implement something like that. But I think there's also something to be said about.
Well, then let's hear your suggestions on how we implement it to the American system. I just want to point out that we choose holidays to celebrate, and people shouldn't have a gun to their head to say you can only celebrate Passover if you also go over the Levant affair or whatever it is. You know what I mean?
I definitely agree, and I don't think that there should be definites in regards to how people celebrate holidays. I mean, there are people who don't celebrate birthdays and things like that, and usually you're not blameless on your birthday. Like, oh, well, you committed a mass murder, so I guess you can't have a birthday.
I turned 32 this year.
Really?
I was a prick.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I turned 19 this year, so I was not a prick.
Okay, good for you. You're one step ahead of me. Okay, but I say it because you mentioned we should also include this sort of day of mourning, this day of recognizing the atrocities. I think this is being singularly applied to Thanksgiving. I think it's being singularly applied because of what you presented as white European supremacy, which I disagree with. But let me, I want you to finish that thought, and then we'll kind of move on.
Oh, okay. So basically, I just think that I think it could be applied to a lot of different holidays. Obviously, maybe not some of them like Valentine's Day and things like that, but I don't really know the origins of some of these holidays.
Bastards at Hallmark might have to pay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and I don't know enough about like the origins of Christianity. I don't really know that much about the Crusades and things like that. So I really can't make too many arguments when it comes to other religions and other holidays that we celebrate, which are often religious based. However,
what your suggestion on Thanksgiving is you can celebrate Thanksgiving, but
no. So I actually think that what we should do is we should just constantly be mindful of what we have done in the past, and so that we don't repeat these actions in the future.
And so, during that time, so let me ask you this, because you just mentioned, you just went down a whole laundry list, right, of bad things that white Europeans did.
Sorry, yeah.
Do you also think that we should be very conscious of the incomparable barbaric acts of evil that the Native Americans committed against each other on that day?
Well,
including the Mexicans you mentioned, the Aztecs, the Incans.
Well, yes, the Aztecs and the Incas. However, those were within
Incans were Peruvian.
Incans were the Aztecs and the Mayans are going to.
But should they not be able to celebrate any national holiday without recognizing the horrible evil, far worse than anything colonialists did, that they did to each other, like ripping someone's heart off, cannibalizing them in front of their wives and kids?
Sure.
Should they not be able to celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
Well, first of all, Cinco de Mayo, I don't think enough people really know the origins behind Cinco de Mayo.
Well, the point is any sort of national holiday.
Yeah, so...
Can they celebrate any holidays in Africa, even though they were the ones who started this, what we know as the modern slave trade, and it still goes on there?
Yeah, so I definitely think that obviously you can argue that everybody has... Sorry, this hat's a little... that everybody is flawed in some way. However, I think that in order to really make some kind of progress in the future, you have to really, it's kind of like I guess it's Catholics, you know, they talk about their sins a lot, and they go to the priest and they're like, this is what I've done. And so I think that there's something noble and actually very progressive in being able to say, this is what we've done in the past, and now I'm thankful that we're here and that we're not currently living in that situation. And so in the future, we now know that this can't happen again.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it up a little bit on you here, so I hope you appreciate this. Not in a way that's controversial, but I don't think that you could argue anyone has done that more than Western European Americans. No one has been browbeaten and admitted to guilt more. For example, in other countries, right, if you were to conquer people or commit mass genocide, you subjugate them. You don't give them back land. That's not what happens. We've done with Native Americans. When you talk about the acts of barbarism, you know, there was no mass genocide. That's just not accurate. They were committing murder in massive numbers. If we talk about giving the land back to Native Americans, which I don't know if you've suggested or you necessarily support that, or it was somebody else. You don't support giving land back.
I mean, I hadn't brought that up. I do believe in like reparations, actually.
Okay, so who do we give it back to? The Mohicans or the Mohawks? Because they were slaughtering each other.
I believe that there should be. But this gets very technical.
Well, no, but my point is there are no national days of mourning where the Mohawks and the Mohicans are recognizing the mass atrocities that they committed, scalping. We learned from them. You're not seeing that from the Mayans. This is why this land was conquered, and it wasn't mass genocide, by the way. It was 50% of the natives that were wiped out. the estimates
God,
are
I'm
about
tired of hearing that.
30% of settlers. So that's not really a mass genocide. How many Gestapo were taken out by Jews at Auschwitz? 0. That's what genocide looks like, right? This was a
Jesus
war
Christ.
with one side that had horses. I'm sure you know they hadn't domesticated horses.
No, they had not.
They didn't even use a wheel.
Yes.
So this was a very regressive society who lived here, by the way, for thousands
That's
of years. We both
insane.
agree that. Thousands of years. Let's go 16.
So now is he trying to say? So is now he trying to say that nothing that happened during World War II, that Hitler wasn't trying to commit genocide against all Jewish people, even though that's literally what he was trying to do
Enemy is gaining ground.
by putting them up into these camps and performing countless cruel experiments on their people and killing them in the masses. And then you say, well, only 0 of those Gestapos were killed. Yeah, because they had all of the firepower. They were walking down the streets with guns and tanks, collecting people door by door. These regularly peaceful people with no weapons, no fight within them. So yes, of course, these Native American tribes are going to put up a fight. They're going to take out some settlers because they have been fighting all their lives for thousands of years, because they've been on this land for thousands of years. Bro, like, you can sit here and argue that, yes, it's not genocide or it's not racist, but you cannot keep saying it's not genocide. Like, that shit irks me.
21.
Okay.
200 years we end slavery.
Sure.
We didn't even need to end cannibalization or burning people alive or ripping out their hearts, but we ended slavery.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. And I think trying to make it seem as though white Western Europeans, as though it was based on some form of racial supremacy, are uniquely responsible for these acts of evil. And that is what you propose. And I haven't heard anyone propose that there should be days of mourning for Native Americans to atone for the crap that they've pulled, or days of mourning for the Jews to atone for what they pulled, or days of mourning for the Palestinians to atone for what they pulled. It always seems to be white European settlers, when the fact is, in the United States of America, we did commit acts of evil. That's human nature, but we are singularly unique for ending so many acts of evil in record time.
However, you
In
could argue
record time.
that white Americans, white Europeans, are
Yeah.
in a position of power compared to so many people, especially Native Americans, especially other African Americans. Name any other
We're in a position of
minority.
power now because we won the war.
Well, but to continue with my point, I think that a lot of policy is.
But do you
no
not
longer
agree with? Do you not see what I just? Do you not agree that that's a subtext here that is important?
I definitely.
Because every time I say,
mean,
well, what about Native? You go, well, I don't know enough about that. I said, well, what about
that's
the
true.
Jews? You go, I don't know enough about that. But you seem to have a laundry list of all your grievances with white European settlers.
Yeah.
And you also don't seem to know a lot about the acts of evil that were committed against them.
Well,
We need
again,
to understand both. We need to understand that they go both ways.
Sorry, did you say against the?
Against Europeans, and certainly
Okay.
against
What
natives
acts
from
is
natives.
evil?
Yes. So
No one was more brutal than Native Americans. than
I would
Native
just,
Americans.
my only argument to that would just be that you're talking about, natives committing atrocities against natives, and that's in their own, but this was when they were in their own land. This was their land, this was their
wasn't.
civilization.
No, it
I mean,
wasn't
if
the
it was
Iroquois. It wasn't their land when they were going
Well,
hard and the Algonquins.
I mean more of like the
Not if you
idea
go
that
with the
this is where
Apaches
they had
and the
lived
Mohawks
their
and the
entire
Mohicans. No,
lives.
but okay. So what separates it is a pond.
Well,
The fact is they were
maybe.
going into someone else's territory, killing, raping their women, burning them alive because they wanted to take their stuff.
Yeah.
And
we
we
didn't go
did-
in, kill them, and burn them alive. We went in and we
Yes, you
traded,
did.
for example, the island of Manhattan. And then they said sometimes there were atrocities committed, but a lot of the time
That's
we
one
bought land.
island.
And then they said, well, no, hold on a second.
Bullshit.
We don't have the same concept of personal property.
Whoa.
Good
Yeah,
example of
that
that
is-
is Manhattan.
Yes.
Manhattan we purchased for 60 guilders worth. Now, it's been taught in this school, I believe, that 60 guilders accounts to $25 worth of junk. I've read this in an academic, I think it was UT, could have been the University of Massachusetts, something like that. So don't fact check me on this, but this was written. 60 guilders equates to $25 worth of modern junk. 60
Okay.
guilders was actually nearly 10,000 animal pelts and lumber and nutwoods. That
Sure.
was given for the island of Manhattan that the Lenape and Canarsie did not want. They live in what is modern Brooklyn. Was purchased. We settled there peacefully. Then they come back in and say, hey, we want it back. I thought this was a lease, because they don't have the same concept of personal property.
Yes.
Then a war starts, and of course, the settlers win.
Of course.
That is very different. I would say that is far more permissible than the Mohicans going in and just slaughtering all the Mohawks they can find.
I think that
And scalping them.
The only thing is that when you think about it, so the settlers.
So just because these one Native American tribe fights and scalps, because he likes to keep using that term as well. That doesn't change the fact that we pretty much did the same fucking thing. And I say we, I don't want to associate with them. I'm not white. I'm just fucking born here. But those settlers did the same exact thing. They went in, they introduced all types of diseases. They did all these little deals to get this land. Why would you attempt to buy this land from people without them understanding what the hell it is? You were essentially just trying to take advantage. And that is what the European white man is very good at. Taking advantage of, in my opinion. Like, they do a great job of that. So it's like, come on, dude. Come win. You can't keep, like, hiding behind that bullshit, bro. I don't like it. I don't like it.
Who came in had obviously been educated in a different way. They had different values. They had different upbringings. I mean, as you said before, the Native Americans who had lived there before, they didn't have access. They hadn't domesticated many animals or horses, and they didn't have access to the. You know,
they were there for thousands of years.
That's a good question, but I think a lot of it is based on their religion, and a lot of that they respect.
Pantheism.
They respect nature. They respect.
They didn't respect nature.
They
hunted and fished more species to extinction per capita than any people in the history of the world.
I didn't really mean it by that in that
Okay.
sense. I think there was more of a respect towards.
I want proof on that, Mr. Crowder.
They hunted and fished more species to extinction.
The enemy took Charlie. Hostile UAV in the area.
So they're gonna try and blame the extinction of what, woolly mammoths, giant beavers, and other massive mammals that roamed North America. They're gonna blame that on Native Americans? Bro. Come on.
Charlie secure. Enemy UAV active.
Woolly mammoths, giant armadillos, and 3 species of camels were among more than 30 mammals that were hunted to extinction by North American humans 13,000 to 12,000 years ago. And that's based off of University of California, Santa Barbara website. That's just what Google threw out for me. So you're going to try and you're going to try and use that as an argument now that these people 13,000, 12,000 years ago hunted these like damn near prehistoric fucking mammals to extinction. And now you're going to say that, well, I would argue that these Native Americans hunted more animals to extinction than anyone else. Bullshit, dude. That's
per capita than any people in the history of the world. They didn't care at all.
I didn't really mean it by that in that sense. I think there was
bullshit.
more of a respect towards like the physical nature.
Sorry, I just get heated because I learned this stuff in school.
No,
and then I
it's
was reading
okay.
like, wait, they fished them out of existence? We
No,
learned the
that's
Pocahontas.
okay.
They're like, wait, they didn't have the wheel? Wait, they never used horses? Everything I learned was a lie.
Yeah,
and then I had to learn about what really happened with these
So everything you knew was a lie. So they were telling you that Native Americans had wheels and horses and all of this stuff. I don't even think horses were native to America or that part of America. Okay, so they were started here in North America. Extinct in their homeland at the end of the last ice series. See? This is science.org. Horses evolved millions of years ago in North America, and after spreading to Eurasia and Africa, went extinct in their homeland at the end of the last ice age. Spanish and British colonizers brought them back. So, like, where is he getting this fucking information from? Native views in laboratory science. Horses evolved millions of years, but okay, so that's what I was just reading. The results showed horses on the Great Plains in the historic period were closely related to horses in Spain at the same time. By the 1770s, however, genetic signatures from British breeds began to filter into the region, and horses there today show a mix of both Spanish and British ancestry. And no links to horses the Vikings are known to have taken as far as Greenland, the researchers showed. Horses that have lived in the Americas in the Ice Age or right after. The researchers looked for traces of DNA hailing from the horses that had lived in the Americas in the Ice Age or right after, and they found none. So, like, where is he pulling this information from?
These turf wars with a lot of the pilgrims and early settlers.
And so I think that is really, I mean, you would be able to argue that those were just like underdeveloped civilizations.
Why this?
Well,
why don't we say they didn't use the wheel?
I think that development is kind of however you think development should be. I mean, some people believe that spiritual development is more important than actual like material development and being able to, sure, some people think that it's incredibly important to have access to electricity, but other people think that having it, that's really like a basis of what people's values are based on what they believe is material.
Not material. I'll talk about rights, equal rights.
Yeah.
Rights for women. We both agree good things.
But
not enslaving and raping women and kids. That wasn't their values.
Yes, but
are some cultures better than other cultures?
I would not argue that
Hold
some
up.
cultures are
Hold up.
material.
Not material. I'll talk about rights, equal rights.
Yeah.
Rights for women. We both agree good things.
But
not enslaving and raping women and kids. That wasn't their values.
Yes, but
Not raping and killing women and children? Dude, that's literally what these Vikings, European that's what they grew up doing. Like, what are you talking about? You can take that all the way back to the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, all of those times in Europe. Where did prostitution start? Let's start there.
Objective Bravo secure. We're taking Alpha. Enemy securing Bravo. The enemy took Charlie. Securing objective Charlie.
Ancient Near East, whatever the hell that means. Sumerian records dating back to 2400 BCE are the earliest recorded mention of prostitution as an occupation. And these are in those European nation states.
Taking effective fire.
European, part of Asia, all of that jazz.
Alpha secure. Enemy securing Charlie.
Ancient Babylonian.
Hostiles launched a cruise missile. We're taking Bravo.
Like, these practices of raping and pillaging have been going on for centuries. And you cannot try and say like that's a strictly Native American thing. No, that's pretty much every victors of war. Especially at that time. You know damn well those settlers were doing the same exact thing, raping and pillaging those freaking, or I should probably stop saying that word, but those freaking settlers were doing the same exact thing to those Native Americans.
The enemy has captured
So
objective. Get securing
what are you trying to say there, Crowder? That it's only Native Americans who freaking grape and pillage?
But I mean,
Are some cultures better than other cultures?
I would not argue that some cultures
See, now
are
he's
better
got
than
to flip
other
it,
cultures.
change
I
it
would
with a
argue
different
Really?
question, so that
that
way we
cultures
can
are different.
get away from
Okay,
that.
well then we just disagree. I think that the culture that says you can't rape and scalp women is better than the culture that says you can steal women.
I would like to say that in that standpoint, that's a different. I was thinking more on the idea of like cultural values based
But
on.
those
like,
are cultural values.
I wouldn't
That's a
really
big
say
reason
that-
for the conflict, right? The
Yeah.
big reason for the conflict is when early settlers come and they go, whoa. You don't get to enslave their children and burn these people alive.
Yeah.
And by the way, you mentioned the Mexicans. I mean, you go down there. Do you know how many conquistadors there were?
No, I
The
don't.
Vikings were
And this is
doing
not a
that.
trick question.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't
Yeah.
know because I wasn't taught in college.
Sure.
I don't know about you. I was taught in college. The conquistadors came in and they conquered these people and they were brutal and they were barbaric and they wiped them out.
Yeah.
Is that what you were taught?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying that's what I was taught.
Yeah.
There were about 500.
Yeah.
Do you know how many natives there were?
A lot more than
Many
500.
tens of thousands. Do you know how many tons of gold they had?
That I don't know.
Do you know how they procured said gold? By enslaving, because they had
Yeah.
no regard for human rights whatsoever, and so they enslaved people, usually after raping and beating them and stealing their women if they were fertile enough, and they would say, okay, you have to go
Really?
and get us gold, and your options are get us gold or die.
Yeah.
So Cortez came with 500 conquistadors. Do you think he can take over an entire land? Because you went through Mexico, you went through all that in the atrocities.
Well-
Do you think he can take over and conquer an entire land with 500 conquistadors?
Yeah.
What's required is natives who were so upset because of the barbarism and how mistreated they were, they felt that they were, and they knew they were better treated by European settlers who came and they said, we're going to take our chances with the guys who have the boom boom sticks.
Yeah, I talked about that briefly earlier. I might not have talked about it in an extent because I was kind of
Right.
listing things. However,
That's why I just kind of went down my list.
no, that's true. And so that is 100% true. And the only thing is that
and that's
that
why
was
the
regarding.
conquistador culture is better. I say it's superior.
Well, I mean, I'll agree to disagree about that. But I mean, I see what your point is. The only thing that I have to say about that is that
They
in
were
Mexico-
ripping out hearts
Well,
of children.
so-
How can you disagree that that's an inferior culture?
I definitely.
I'm sorry, I
No.
respect you sitting down, but ripping out hearts
I don't believe
and
that
sacrificing them. But that was a central value to the culture. How can we not say the
Whose
culture that says,
culture?
no, we don't rip out.
Whose culture? Because that sounds like maybe Mayan culture. Because they were talking, they did a lot of sacrificing.
Securing objective Alpha. Securing objective Charlie. Charlie secure. Securing objective Bravo.
See, that's real big on Aztecs.
Hostile UAV in the area. Enemy UAV active. Friendly UAV online. We're taking Bravo. The enemy holds 2 objectives. Hostile SAE incoming. Hostile UAV.
Mayans, Aztecs. So this is South American Native Americans, essentially. But let's see. According to Roman and Greek sources, Phoenicians and Carthaginians sacrificed infants to their gods. Yeah, let's put that right there. Who believed in human sacrifice? According to Roman and Greek sources, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, or however you pronounce that, sacrificed infants to their gods. The bones of numerous infants have been found in Carthaginian archaeological sites. So, it's not just Native American people who were thinking this. This is other people too. These are European cultures too. So, like, for him to use that as an argument does not work. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit, bud. You can't sit here and act like one culture is better than the other. What about the Spanish Inquisition? Like the way they were going about killing people just because they thought it was part of their religion. So, let's look at the Spartans. If their babies were considered weak, not strong enough, they instantly tossed them babies off a mountain.
All objective. We're taking Charlie.
Just because they weren't meeting standards.
Switching mags.
European country once again. Now granted, that is an older European culture, and those have evolved because they later went into like more sophisticated stuff because of their evolution track the way they went. But you don't get to sit here and say like, oh, this was so much better. Nah, dude. It wasn't. It's just as bad.
Got one down. Hostile FAE near your position.
Taking effective fire.
Securing objective Alpha. Getting hit hard. We're taking Alpha. We're taking Bravo. Alpha secure.
Who would they target?
Taking Alpha.
Having largely purged the country of
Failed. Return to base.
Roman Catholics, having largely purged the country of Jews and Muslims, as well as many former members of those faiths who had converted to Christianity, the Spanish Inquisition turned its attention to prominent Roman Catholics. This is just mass killing of random people just based off of how they believe. These are European cultures doing the same types of atrocities that these Native American people were doing, that he's trying to claim these Native American people were doing. Let's take a look at okay. So, when did colonizers come to America? While the Norse established some colonies in the northeastern part of North America as early as the 10th century, systemic European colonization began in 1492. Right? 1492. The Spanish Inquisition was created on November 1st, 1478. And went from follow the origins and evolution of the Spanish Inquisition 1478 to 1834. So during the time of colonization, the Spanish Inquisition was taking place. Just as barbaric in their means. Targeting, let's see, because the Spanish Inquisition is far-reaching, the exact amount of executions is debated among, as far as how many Jews were killed in the Spanish Inquisition, to be in the hundreds of thousands, some in the millions, some as low as 1,500. Which I think that's probably a bit low, but I would say, you know, several thousands is probably a good ballpark figure. And they were torturing people just to get confessions out of them, to get the information they wanted for whatever purpose. Torture was used only to get confession and wasn't meant to actually punish the accused heretic for his crimes. Some inquisitors used starvation, forced the accused to consume and hold vast quantities of water or other fluids, heaped burning coals on parts of their body. So Tell me again how they're much more civilized than these Native Americans?
Hearts to the sun god, and we're going to subjugate you so that you don't continue to rip out hearts to the
So just because we weren't doing it to say it was a sacrifice for these gods, no, we can say by the power of God, we can then do all these tortures and killings.
sun god, how can you say that one culture is not better than the other? Do you believe that?
I mean, I've just never really believed that it was.
So how can you say one of them is better than the other in this instance?
Specifically our right to go in and say that type of thing. It's just not.
Come on,
I mean, I'm just
Crowder.
not pro.
But it was
going
their
into
right to
other
rip out the heart?
To be honest, if you live
Of
in that
this-
society, I guess
What?
that is. Yeah.
But the people who were born didn't get born like, oh, I'm signing up to have my heart thrown down like Apocalypto.
I think that they're.
Do you see what you're saying right now? It's
Yeah, but
unbelievable. And as a Jewish person, especially when you really understand the importance of Jews, and I believe Jews need a homeland with Israel because they
Yeah.
had their rights completely violated for a long time. I
sorry
mean, what do you
about
think
that.
would happen if right now today the Palestinian ripped the heart out?
Okay, so he's talking about ripping the heart out of these people. Now, in most cases, when you're referring to this type of sacrifice to the sun gods that he's making reference to, that's once again referring to Aztecs and Mayans. Culturally, those Mayan and Aztec people were essentially willing to give up themselves for this sacrifice because they viewed it as a sacrifice to their god and it's going to benefit their people. Regardless of how barbaric and wrong it is, that was their belief behind it, right? What was the belief behind torturing and killing all of these people? I don't want to do it there. I don't want to lose where I'm at. Why did the Spanish Inquisition start? The institution of the Spanish Inquisition is ostensibly established to combat heresy. So the institution of the Spanish Inquisition was ostensibly established to combat heresy. The Spanish Kingdom was unified with the marriage of Ferdinand II and Isabella, and the Inquisition served to consolidate power in the monarchy. It was a judicial institution that lasted from 1478 and 1834. It was, but in practice, it resulted in consolidating power in the monarchy of the newly unified Spanish Kingdom. Huh. So, just because these two royal families came together, they essentially created this this court system, essentially, that had whatever they wanted to do. So if you deviated from the religion in any form of way, you could then be tortured and killed. How is that any better? Let's look at some of these examples. So like those sacrifices where they're ripping the hearts out, well, they would kill the person first. So the person would be dead once they were ripping the hearts out, from my understanding. I could be wrong. We'll look that up here. Let's go ahead and look that up right now. Read. Nothing new. Perform sacrifices when through the early farming culture as an extended. All God sacrifice. So So, da. Human sacrifice was in this sense the highest level of an entire panoply of offerings through which the Aztecs sought to repay their debts to the gods. Sacrificing of animals was also common. Human sacrifice to massive temple pyramids was an offering hour. Self-sacrifice. People would offer maguey thorns tainted with their own blood and would offer blood from their tongues, earlobes, or genitals. These intervals of previous Chinese series of people, but for many reasons we expected to bless children and greet and cheer Passover. Okay, so most of the sacrificial rituals took more than 2 people to perform. In the usual procedure of the ritual, the sacrifice would be taken to the top of the temple. The sacrifice would then be laid on a stone slab by 4 priests, and their abdomen would be sliced open by a 5th priest with a ceremonial knife made of flint. The most common form of sacrifice was heart extraction. Was both the seed of the individual and the fragment of the sun's heat. The kamal was a very important religious tool used during sacrifice. The cut was made in the abdomen and went through the diaphragm. The priest would rip out the heart, which would then be placed in a bowl held by a statue of the honored god, and the body would then be thrown down the temple stairs. The body would land on a terrace on the base of the pyramid. So if you ask me, this person was probably dead before the heart even came out. They're getting sliced open at the abdomen and the diaphragm. They're probably dead by that point. Just from blood loss, probably. Let alone any other, like the pain itself would probably take them out. So, quick slit. Your stomach's open. You're probably dying within a couple minutes of that. And then your heart gets ripped out. Pretty brutal, not gonna lie. But let's look at some of the stuff that the Spanish Inquisition was known for. Strapado is a form of torture that began with the medieval Inquisition. In one version, the hands of the accused were tied behind his back and the rope looped over a brace in the ceiling of the chamber or attached to a pulley. Then the subject was raised until he was hanging from his arms behind his back. This might cause the shoulders to pull out of their sockets. Sometimes the torturers added a series of drops, jerking the subject up and down. Weights could be added to the ankles and feet to make the hanging even more painful. That sounds a lot worse than having your being killed by having your stomach cut open. The rack was another well-known torture method associated with Inquisition. The subject had his hands and feet tied or chained to rollers at one of both ends of a wooden or metal frame, and then the rollers were turned with a handle which pulled the chains or ropes in increments and stretched the subject's joints. So basically, Your hands and feet are tied up, and then there's people on either side pulling you apart. If the torturer continued turning the rollers, the accused's arms and legs could be torn off. Often, simply seeing someone else being tortured on the rack was enough to make another person confess. And in most cases, there was no proof to what they were trying to get these people to confess about. There was no like basis for it. They could have just picked somebody off the street and said, "I don't like you. You looked at me wrong. So now we're gonna go ahead and put you on this rack because I heard homie down the street was saying that you don't believe in the church. So we're gonna do this, and you're gonna tell us if that's what you said or not." While the accused heretics who were on the strappado or the rack, inquisitors often applied other torture devices to their bodies. So as if those other two weren't bad enough, they could be hit with heated metal pincers, thumb screws, boots, or other devices designed to burn, pinch, or otherwise mutilate their hands, feet, or bodily orifices. Things going into places that they probably shouldn't be going. Okay. Wow. Okay. Inquisitors needed to extract a confession. See what else they got, because I know they've got tons. They invented waterboarding, it looks like. Well, I wouldn't say invented, but they used waterboarding. Oh, okay. The Inquisition, a model for modern... a model for modern interrogation. NPR. Okay. Let's see. The dead bodies were burned on public funeral pyres. Oh man, it's almost like they are just as brutal and barbaric.
Of a Jewish child is sacrificed to Allah.
Well, I don't think that would necessarily happen.
Of course it wouldn't happen.
But I'm also saying that this was, I mean, we're talking about a time that was not thousands of years ago, but it originated thousands of years ago. And
but
so
it was
these are
thousands of years
practices
ago with the settlers too, is my point.
Yeah.
My point is, they had thousands of years, still ripping out hearts and cannibalizing. Western Europeans had thousands of years, plumbing and the wheel and horses.
Yeah.
One is better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You don't think one is better?
It's just that I don't think that we have the right to go to other civilizations and basically just try and, sure, it might make it. I mean, I think there's something noble in saying, sure, we could try and make their life easier, but I don't think that we have the right to say, to tell other people what they're doing wrong when this is what they believe in. This is it's a religion, and I think that bringing in Judaism into it is not in my opinion a very good thing, just because I think I think that I
brought Christianity into it too. I'm saying I believe that the Jewish culture is better than the ripping out hearts culture.
I mean, I would also say that I don't really like bringing the Holocaust into things like that, just
I
because
didn't bring the Holocaust into it.
I mean, it's been brought in just before, but I definitely think that talking about modern day Judaism and then
talking about the
referring
Gestapos
to older
not
religions, the
getting killed.
Mayans, which to this day still practice but do not continue with these ripping out rituals, and maybe that's because
it's impermissible.
Maybe that's because we came in and we said maybe you shouldn't do that anymore.
Right.
But at the same time, we shouldn't be saying instead you should convert to Christianity. Instead, you should convert to our religion because it's superior. I think that
Well, namely,
There's-
it was because at that point, the reason we had to do it was because to ensure that people weren't being cannibalized and having their hearts ripped out, the only sort of fail-safe was you're going to put a cross next to your initial there, so we know that you've moved on from heart removal territory.
Yeah, the only thing that I think is that just starts the process of assimilation. That still is
Great.
very prominent. You like assimilation?
Yeah, I think as a matter of fact, that's the biggest argument against genocide against Native Americans, because most of them assimilated, and most of them
Yeah.
assimilated because most wanted to.
I would actually think that a lot of that,
Out of
and I mean,
fear?
obviously I didn't live during
Out
that
of
time, so I really
coercion?
can't make
I'm older than you, but I wasn't quite alive at that time
Yes,
either.
I'll give you that one.
But I do have some grays here in the sideburns, and it makes me sad.
But I definitely would think that fear was a reason that a lot of people assimilated, and that's a reason a lot of people assimilate today. Is
Fear of
that
having their hearts ripped out or being
Not
cannibalized by other
necess-
natives. They said, whatever is going on with these new guys who have the funny translucent skin, it's got to be better than being cannibalized and burned alive. I'm going to go with...
But see, you can't use that as an argument, because even if it was tribe versus tribe, a lot of them believed the same religious thing. So in the case of the Mayan Aztec stuff, yes, the Aztecs were very well known for sacrificing people to the sun god, and in most cases those sacrifices were people that they killed, like that they conquered in a war or a battle. So those people who were conquered or defeated in that battle, that were going to these Aztec, who were taken over by this Aztecs, already knew what it was. They were already expecting to be sacrificed before they lost, like walking into the battle with these Aztec people. They knew what to expect, but they also respected it because they also had a very similar ritual. So once again, you can't use that as a thing, because it doesn't. Yes, you translucent white folk came over here unknown with these boom boom sticks and totally screw them over. They could fight against another dude with a freaking sword and a bow and arrow because they've got swords and bow and arrows, or spears and bow and arrows. They don't have boom boom sticks. They don't have smallpox covered blankets that they pass around amongst themselves. They don't do that. So of course, fear would be a big part of why they would assimilate. So, bro, that's...
With you, we gave them some fire water and let them duke it out, and then came in and picked up the pieces. And I just think it's important to understand the history of this. I agree that there were, for example, there were some trades that went on that were terrible, and there were some acts of evil that were absolutely committed from European colonialists. I want to make it very clear that I'm not denying that.
Sure.
But in this
would hope
conversation, you have presented it as though they are singularly unique, while equating all cultures,
Well-
but holding one culture accountable. And what I am saying, and the reason that I support Thanksgiving not only as a day, but as a concept, and I'm grateful for the settlers, is that Western European culture and the Constitution and American culture, a culture of ideas, not a people, not an ethno-state like we have with Native Americans, I believe is a wonderful thing. I'm very glad that that happened. I'm glad that the colonialists came here and that they created the kind of country that we all get to live in now. I'm okay with it. And I think they are singularly unique and responsible for ending acts of barbarism and evil across the world that the Native.
But those people did not create this land that we are enjoying right now. It took that, like, hundreds of years of evolution to get us to this point, and we're still not even in a good point to say we're that much better than everyone else. There's other countries doing it better than we are. So, bro, like, none of your points are making
Native
it.
Americans continued and were continued in continents to the globe, many places to this day. So I don't think you can hold them accountable as being the only people who need to mourn their acts of evil. I think instead they should be praised and held accountable for the fact that they are singularly unique in stopping a lot of that.
But don't you think they should also be held accountable for the atrocities that they have?
I think no one's been held more accountable than they have.
I mean, I think
Yeah,
that
that's
there
a
have
lie.
been, I mean, I've been to like Germany, and they have entire museums, thousands of, like, it just seems like thousands of monuments, museums, talking about the Holocaust.
I think Germany sucks. I think a place
Take that up with Germany.
I think a place that bans books because they don't want you to know about their distorted history.
I don't think they still do that.
They did it up until only like in the last several decades. And you can't speak freely. There's no freedom of speech in Germany, by the way. It's a hate crime if you talk about the Holocaust in unsavory terms or Nazi Germany, which I am not at all. I'm saying not at all pro-Holocaust, pro-alliance of good, pro-Israel. Okay, I'm probably more pro-Israel than anyone you know right here, but I do
It's giving, I'm not racist because I've got a black friend.
think that if someone is going to be a Holocaust denier,
That
that
cringe
shouldn't be a
face.
crime, and it is in Germany. I don't think that a
Yeah.
country that has no freedom of speech and that bans books and be a crime, and it is. I do think that if someone is going to be a Holocaust denier, that shouldn't be a crime, and it is in Germany. I don't think that a
Yeah.
country that has no freedom of speech and that bans books. And by the way, in the realm of history, that's pretty new.
That
Germany
is
went to
really new.
war with the entire world twice.
Yeah. Well, Germany and allies, but yeah, I mean that's
Axis, yes.
yeah.
But that gets to cultural relativism. We see them as the axis of evil. They see us as the axis of evil. Difference is, we weren't the ones gassing Jews. So I say that objectively,
Yes.
they were the axis of evil.
No, yes, I'm not disagreeing about them.
So now we
being
can
them.
objectively say that gassing Jews, a Holocaust, is objectively evil, but we can't say it's objectively evil to rip out the heart of an unwilling native to sacrifice it on a
I
pyramid.
think that you're twisting my words a little bit.
I
But
don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
You are
that's
twisting
fine.
her
But
words
I definitely think
a lot.
that I just don't think that it's our right to go in and take away what we've done. And to this day, is we have basically put Native Americans to the side, and we've put other ethnicities to the side, and we've basically said, if you want to live in our society, you have to assimilate yourself, and you have to learn how to become a true American.
And what does that mean?
I have literally no idea what it means to be a true American, because our country is literally based off of immigrants. And so the fact that today we don't even live in a world where we live in a world where people believe that English should be the national language, and where entire populations are, told that they aren't American enough because they speak Spanish, or because they don't, talk or look or dress like
her
they're
cook.
American, and there's no real definition.
I'll tell you what a true American is. A true
Let her
American is
cook,
someone
Crowder.
who, this is
Well, notice how every time she starts getting on a good point and she starts raising very good points, he has to cut her off. He has to stop her. Oh, man. See, like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, she's just getting going on making her point. And she's making a very good, valid argument. But you gotta stop her before it sounds too good. You don't see nothing wrong with that? I do.
the beauty of being American, and I think you conflated two things. You said we cast aside Native Americans. We didn't. Most of them assimilated, most of them willingly, some of them unwillingly. We didn't cast aside minorities. We freed them, and then we said, let's have a national day of Thanksgiving and let's celebrate this in unity. We didn't cast women aside. We gave them equal rights, and that's it. Okay, let's all. We made progress. Progress happens in stages.
400 years of
I know,
our
as opposed
country.
to the thousands of years of Native Americans. Good luck on them getting the women right to vote. So I don't
Wow.
think you say we cast aside natives. We cast aside all these people. None of that is accurate. None of those things are accurate. Because, and then you say we're a nation of immigrants. Well, hold on a second. I thought we just cast immigrants aside. Neither one of those things are
do.
true. Neither one of those things are true. The truth is that unlike Native Americans who wanted an ethno-state, and by the way, an extreme example because they wanted only their tribal bloodlines to continue, and you see this in other countries across Africa, you see it across the Middle East, being a true American is subscribing to a set of ideals, and those can be found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the amendments therein. That's the wonder of the United States, and that's why so many Native Americans, so many Haitians who migrate here, Italians, Jews, Polish Jews at one point, of course, Irish, have all become American because it's about subscribing to these ideals that people will traverse the entire ocean. They will brave the stormiest seas to try and willingly assimilate to American culture. And I'm gonna leave it on this. I believe that's because it is superior, and we ended evil to a degree that has not been seen before the United States. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. And that's why I love Thanksgiving. And I'm grateful that we both live here, and I'm grateful that you wore the hat.
Watch Louder with Crowder live Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I like it because I feel like that girl was bringing up a lot more good points than the previous one. Like the first girl, I think she was bringing up some fair points, but this other girl kind of took a different route other than just trying to say we need to acknowledge and yada yada, which I think the first girl was right on that. But if you notice, every time in these situations, the second someone starts going and really speaking some stuff, they gotta stop them. They gotta shut them down. Stop her before she says too much. It's funny. It's very funny to me. Yeah, that's so jacked for you to sit here and say like these European settler states were so much more superior, so much better, when in all actuality they were just as bad. Just as bad. With that being said, everyone, I think we're gonna wrap it up for the night. This is just kind of like thought-provoking for me, and I kind of like doing stuff like this, so I want to continue looking for videos that I could just, you know, kind of respond to. We'll fact check it as we go. We'll look it up as we go. Could care less about my KD. This is just for background for me to have fun while I'm watching these things, so I'm not really totally worried about it like most people are. But yeah, like I'll concede that by definition maybe it's not racist, but it was definitely genocide. It was definitely genocide. I think the reason why people think of racism is because there's such a big discrepancy as far as like the one being more evolved, like technologically, while the other one is a little bit more primitive. But one was looking at themselves as better than the other, and that's why a lot of people start thinking of racism in that aspect, because most times those thoughts of being better than the other are racially driven, where in this situation it wasn't necessarily racially driven. It was, we're just better. And that's not cool, man. It's not it doesn't make it right at all. So I don't know. I'm gonna continue to believe that it was genocide of the Native American people. The European folks were no better than the Native Americans, as Crowder wanted to say. And so I need to do 2 more of these. Get 15 operator point blank kill. Oh, I gotta do some SMG stuff. Okay, we'll work on that tomorrow. But until then, everybody, like, peace, love, and spread it on. You know, let's stop the hate somewhere eventually. Let's not be closed-minded to think that, you know, maybe we are wrong. Maybe we are racist in certain aspects. I personally try to reflect on that every time I share something. If somebody calls me out or contradicts anything I have to say, I don't get defensive about it. I try to I try to take that step back and look at what they're having to say and compare it to what I'm saying, and, you know, try to say like, okay, I'm wrong on this. Maybe I need to change my thought process on this, and then go from there. But it doesn't sound like these people like Crowder want to do that. So stay open-minded, peoples. love one another, spread joy. We can all get along. That's what I want to end it on. Till next time.